Hey everybody, back with another dividend analysis, and today we're going to be looking at Ford Motor Company, or simply Ford, ticker F. Wanted to look at Ford because they recently reinstated their dividend, and maybe it's something we could look at. But before we get into that, I did want to thank everybody for the 300 subs. It does mean quite a bit to me. I do appreciate it. I don't really ever plan on monetizing this channel, but it is nice to be able to just share some very, very rudimentary dividend analysis with other people and just talk about stuff. So once again, thank you. Now getting into it. We'll have to take a peek at the yield over on MarketWatch because we can't get one on NASDAQ, and as we can see, we're currently sitting at about 2%. So just a little bit better than the wide market, doing better than the S&P by, maybe 0.5%, maybe 0.75% at this point. Nothing to write home about, but it is bigger than the average. Now, going and looking at the dividend history is where things get very interesting. They currently declared a dividend of 10 cents to be paid on December 1st, and if we go back about 8 years ago, we can see that the dividend is exactly the same. And we can also see that the dividend has been very spotty, going up and down and kind of sitting at this 15-cent range for quite a long time up until the crash in 2020. If one is a dividend appreciation investor, this should be a red flag. The company is not just not raising their dividend consistently, but it's dropping, it's having weird spots. These are probably special dividends noted in here, this 55 or this 28. This is just it's very concerning to see a dividend make these kind of movements. If this was, say, it had been 10 cents here in 2013, gone up to 12.5, then gone up to 15, and then just sat there, and we'd still been getting that throughout all of 2020 and 2021, then that might be okay. There's not a lot of appreciation there, but it's very stable. The company's able to support that dividend. You don't have to worry about it. But we don't have that here. We've had the dividend go up to 15 cents, then it was suspended, and now when it's being reinstated, it's at less than the previous level. So that is a little concerning. Keep that in mind going forward. Next, let's go take a peek at the financials, and as always, we'll start with the cash flow. Over the last 5 years, and we are going from 2015 to 2020 here because Ford does not, their fiscal year ends on the 31st of December, so I don't have the 2021 numbers in yet, but we'll use 2020 for now and just kind of project outward. Going over the last 5 years, we can see there has been growth in cash flow, but it was very much a trough up to a new peak here, going from 13 down to 7 billion, now back up to 18.5 billion. This number, this 18.5 billion, is going to be a fluke. This is inflation, this is shortages, this is things like that pushing that free cash flow number up. This is them, selling things off, trying to make sure they're able to sustain themselves through lockdowns and things of that nature. I would really, really doubt that this number normalizes anywhere near this. I would expect it to drop back down to this, 10 to 12 billion dollar, maybe a little bit more than that in the next year or two. So just keep that in mind. Next, we can go through our ratios of free cash flow, and we can see that Ford will, if this 10-cent dividend does go through, and they do it for all 4 quarters, they're going to be looking at paying out about $1.57 billion in dividends over the next 12 months. As we can see, that's very easily supported by this 18 billion number. Of course, will that stay that way going forward? Probably not, but currently that sits at about 8% of free cash flow if numbers stay exactly the same. Of course, 8% is well below our 50% ideal range, so that's nothing to worry about there. But it is a bit concerning if they do have this much free cash flow, but they're only paying out 8% in dividends. They also don't think that this 18 billion is going to stay the way it is, or they, why not pay out 10 or 15 or even 20%? That's still not a ton. You're nowhere near 50 or 75% of your free cash flow. It's very likely that they expect this cash flow to drop back down to more normal levels over the next year or so. Heading over to the income, we can see that in 2020, they lost money, so there will be no ratio there, but that is expected with what happened over, the lockdowns and everything. I mean, they just were not able to sell vehicles for obvious reasons. So although there have been a few issues looking at the financials, I really wouldn't count this that much. They should return to profit over when they come out with their end of year. I would be surprised if they were still in the red going forward. Now, some things. Now, when we're looking at Ford, what does Ford do? It's pretty simple. They sell cars. People buy cars. There you go. There's not much else to it. The car industry is so confusing nowadays with EVs and everything, especially with a company like Ford. It's one could argue, people who are buying things like Ford Fusions or other of their models like that, that might maybe there's some EV potential there. But people who are buying F-150s, F-250s, Rangers, if you're thinking about buying an electric, work pickup truck, you need to sort your life out, because that's not a thing that works. It's a very odd space with all of these. People are saying, well, we don't want to use gas cars anymore. Ford's never going to be an electric vehicle company. It's just there's too much mystique or whatever built up around it. The people who are going to want electric cars are going to say, I want one from one of these new companies. Why would I get one from Ford? And the people who buy Fords are going to be like, I don't want an electric car. I want, my diesel truck, so on and so forth. So it's a very odd space. It's hard to navigate when looking at it. It's really just going to depend on, how the next couple years go with all of the social, government, environmental issues that are going on. You're going to have to pay a lot of attention to that if you're thinking about investing in any car company, especially one like Ford. Now, going over this, is this something you should be looking at? Is this something anybody should be looking at? From an appreciation standpoint, again, very unlikely. This 10-cent dividend, it might go up, sure, it might get back up to this 15, maybe even 20-cent range, but it's just the way their cash flow is, it's going to drop again. It's going to drop from that $18.5 billion, and it's going to be odd if they want to raise that dividend while their cash flow is going back to a normal level. So it's very spotty there. From an appreciation level, I don't see it there. And again, from an income level, it's barely above what you're getting on average. There are some car companies that have higher dividends than this. Honda, I believe, for example. And there's just other better companies where you can get that 2% dividend if that's as low, or as high, I should say, as you want to go. But yeah, Ford, I don't want to say it's a meme stock like a lot of people are saying, but it's definitely something where its price is being pushed up more by news than by fundamentals. That's definitely true. But overall, this really isn't a dividend play. This is something where you're looking at the company and you're looking at, what their plans are for the future, and you're saying, I'm going to get on board with this because I believe this, and it just happens to pay a dividend. But otherwise, from a dividend perspective, not really much there. So yeah, once again, thank you guys for the 300 subs, and I will see you next time.